Do you want to talk about WWDC, though? Because this is a time when you get very funny on Twitter and become very active. I know I've taken more interest in it this year myself, slightly, because now I listen to all the same podcasts as you, and they're all Mac computer programmers. All I can hear them talk about is this big bash in.
What do you mean funny on Twitter?
Well, you become very active.
I'm just wondering if by funny that's code for irritating. I think irritating is the word that you're probably looking for.
No, I don't. I don't find it irritating at all. But like, you tell everyone to mute you because you're about to go crazy, and you live tweet it a little bit. And
yes.
Yeah.
I basically, For anyone who is not aware, WWDC is the big. It's annual It's the big annual Apple Developers Conference where they make announcements. I mean, in theory, it's aimed for the people who program stuff for iOS and OS X, but it's become a bit of an Apple public announcement as well. And they for the past, I think, 3 years now, have broadcast it live. And I usually do watch it live because I'm very interested. And then this is one of the fun things about Twitter as opposed to Facebook, is I do like the immediacy of Twitter, that you can say something and other people are watching the thing at the same time and you can see what people are saying. So I think it's
what does WW stand for?
It's Worldwide Developers Conference. Not impressed?
Well,
did you want something cool?
Well,
the wow Developers
No, it just
Conference?
should have Apple or something in the name, shouldn't it? Because it's an Apple thing, but it's kind of a bit misleading, that.
I think the Apple is presumed there.
Fair enough.
WWDC?
No,
I think it used to be called something else, I think.
The funny thing about this thing is, like, it has this reputation for these announcements where, like, they'll announce something like a new iPhone or an iPad.
Can I stop you? I have to stop you right now.
They didn't announce the iPhone at WWDC.
No, but this irritates me for people who don't follow Apple closely enough.
Wow.
I mean, not that everybody should, but what I should really say there is it irritates me about the news, because the news is always speculating about Apple releasing some new iPhone or something. And I feel like, guys, if you follow this company even just slightly, you should know this is not their hardware announcement time.
They do make hardware. If you let me finish my point.
Oh, okay.
Well, for a start, they do make hardware announcements at this conference sometimes.
Yeah, they're minor They're not the iPhone though. The iPhone always gets its own event.
Yeah, but they do make hardware announcements at this thing, and I've been listening to all the experts speculating about what they may or may not announce, and there's been a lot of talk about hardware. Mm-hmm. So I was putting it in the context of some people expect there to be maybe some glitzy, shiny announcement like a new iPhone. Mm-hmm. This year seems to have caused a tremendous amount of excitement, and all the Apple nerds are saying this has exceeded our expectations and it's awesome, and I can't believe all this amazing new stuff they've announced. And none of it is of particular interest to sort of the mainstream media or the average Joe who just wants to buy a new iPhone, which I find very interesting. That all the nerds are saying this is amazing. They've really kept all these amazing secrets and wowed us off our feet. And yet there's nothing you can point to like a shiny new phone or some wearable technology or something. Do you want to tell me what you thought of the announcement?
Well, I would say, WWDC is kind of often like that the general public, it's harder to point out things to them that are going to be really interesting. That's again because it's sort of aimed for this particular
insiders
audience. Yeah, and I'm interested in it just out of personal interest, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend that an average person watch the WWDC announcement. I think that's a bit of a nerdy thing to do, but no, I watched it. I was really interested in it, and people who were following me on Twitter got to hear some of my thoughts on those things. And I'm sorry for everybody who logged onto Twitter later and just saw 300 messages from me clogging up their timeline. I wish there was some way I could stop that from happening, but well, skip to the top. That's what Twitter's for.
What should I take from it? Like, what's your favorite thing, or what do you most want to tell me about?
Well, again, I'm no expert, but I did think the biggest deal was the new programming language, Swift, that they've operated. And it was funny because on Twitter, just moments before they announced it, I had a little remark saying that these conferences always make me wish that I could program. that I could do this on a much more competent level because I essentially don't have any real programming skills.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they announced this brand new language. And I have personally always been kind of interested or toyed around with the idea of doing some iOS development, partly because it's a more constrained environment than the computer. And so, of course, when they announce this new language, I suddenly get really excited and think, "Ooh, I should. Now is the time to get into this.
Do it.
But
Do it.
yeah, for me, it's an issue of time, and that kind of project I think competes with my main livelihood. That's a very mentally intense kind of task.
Yeah.
Whereas like the podcast we discussed before, it takes up time, but it doesn't take time away from video production because it's a very different sort of work.
Yeah.
And so I'm highly aware that that iOS programming would totally steal time from video production. And so that's, like you said, not having time to make videos, this is one of those things that I have to decide about. It's like, well, am I really going to get into this well enough to be able to program something? Probably not. But it is really tempting, and I might be interested in a couple of months to see if somebody writes a really good book or puts together a really good video series on introduction to iOS development with Swift. I might just check it out and just see. But anyway, I think that's probably the biggest deal from their announcement, because that is a big, for the future of the company, this is a really important decision kind of announcement. But yeah, I think, again, for most non-nerdy Apple followers, you could totally skip this whole WWDC, not know anything about it. It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't make any difference. But for insiders, it's great.
The thing with this new language... Sorry. Do you know what that noise was? I just dropped my little book of passwords. I'm not even joking.
Oh no.
With this new language, obviously I understand what a programming language is, and they've secretly made a new one behind closed doors. What? Like, why? Like, is this now going to be the language that they want everyone to use to make apps on iPhones with? Is it going to be compulsory to use this eventually? Is it just another one you can use? What's going on here?
My guess is that they're going to transition to this being compulsory at some point in the future. And the really interesting thing is, I can't remember, I think I downloaded the little Swift book because I did just want to take a look and see how does this language look. Again, I'm not a programmer, but I have programmed in languages, and so I know the kind of look of different languages. Python and Lisp and back in the day Pascal. I don't know if Pascal is used very much anymore. So I was just curious to see how it looked. And there was some remark that they had about how this language can be used for everything from the smallest iOS app to a Mac desktop app to writing a whole operating system. I thought that was an interesting remark to have in their little book. So I wonder if Apple's long-term plans... Again, I'm just speculating here, but maybe they're thinking of switching everything they do internally over to this language that they control, which would be very Apple-like. Apple is renowned for wanting to have control over every aspect of all of their products, and so I don't see why the language that they're written in would necessarily be different. But I imagine it's going to be compulsory at some point in the future, and again, I'm not an expert here, but the at least the bits that I can pick up on, because I'm vaguely familiar with Objective-C, is that there's a whole bunch of kinds of mistakes that you can very unintentionally easily make if you're writing a program in Objective-C, that the way Swift is structured is not possible to make. And so that makes it easier for programmers, and it just reduces the overall amount of errors that occur in the development cycle. So I don't see why they wouldn't eventually push people to do it. But, with Apple, it's always speculation. You never really know what their plans are. They just announce, here's this thing, and then maybe in 2 or 3 years they'll say, by the way, for the next version, you have to write all your programs in this language.
Tell you what, that company's good at keeping secrets for a big company.
Yes, given their size, they're remarkably good. I mean, the hardware stuff leaks, which, I mean, at that point, you start talking about, factories in China with tens of thousands of people. You can't reasonably expect to keep that stuff secret.